what's up? Welcome back. So today we're doing something sort of different and sort of fun, which is I'm showing you my top favorite 15 things that I upcycled in 2020. So upcycling and sewing surprised even me in being something I am really passionate about, and it was such a great creative escape for me in 2020. I think we all sort of needed little micro escapes in 2020. I'm going in order of easiest to more complex, obviously because as I went along, I started to learn more and become more adventurous. So let's get straight into it. I have a lot to cover. Let's start off with number one. This Gap denim skirt that I'm sure I had from when I worked at Gap, and I changed my mind about it, tried to sell it, no one was interested. Finally pulled it and I used it to practice making my very first pillow. A few things I love about it is I love how I place the seams and the buttons right down the center to give it kind of a very sort of minimal but playing into the denim being the material, and so I like that I used those seams that it already had as part of the design. And I think my favorite thing about it is just that it was my very first upcycle. Number two is these pretty simple, let's call them boot cuffs. My favorite thing about them is I use this smocked velvet fabric that's super stretchy, and then I paired it with this dainty sort of vintage looking romantic lace, and then I left the back open so that way I could tie them in a bow if I wanted or knot them, and that way they're also adjustable, so it fits perfectly with whatever size my calf is, or if I want to place them lower on my leg or higher up. So I like how I kind of included that versatility, even though it's a very simple project. And that brings us into number three, which is when I ventured out and tried to work with a crochet Afghan blanket, which had this really cool zigzag print. Again, I tried to sell this for the longest time and nobody was interested, so I pulled it to try to learn how to sew with knit fabric. And what I didn't know is this was probably one of the hardest knit fabrics I could have started with, because if you don't sew it right away, it starts to unravel. And so that was a little nerve-wracking. And I love how these little boot cuffs came out because they look very retro, very 70s. I like how I was able to line up the sort of, what is that? The chevron or the zigzag pattern. I lined it up pretty well, but I also learned that I have a lot to learn about working with like knit crochet fabric. It's very difficult, above my skill level currently. The next one is so easy, but I love the effect that it had. So I essentially took a baby swimsuit. I used those scissors that have like little zigzag, what are those called? Pinking shears. I used pinking shears to remove it from the swimsuit so that way the fabric wouldn't fray. Although I know now, I'm almost certain that swimsuit fabric is one of those fabrics that doesn't fray anyway, but I didn't know that at the time. So I removed it from the swimsuit, and then that was it. Like if I needed to adjust it, I could have, but I tied my hair up in a big ballerina bun and then I put it around and it fit perfectly. Of course, I could pin it in place to keep it there, but I just love that like artistic ballerina vibe it gives off. Very feminine, very fun, and very easy. Next up is this little set of tote bags. These I love so much because they're the first two tote bags that I made with lining successfully, and I even patched together the outer fabrics to sort of have a cohesive vibe because I made these out of scrap fabrics, and I'm just overall really pleased with like the overall look of them. It was exactly what I wanted them to look like, and that doesn't happen often as a beginner, so I absolutely love these two little totes. And next up we have this little salmon colored anorak jacket that I had in my head, like the idea of taking some of these more plain garments that I already had on hand. So this was my jacket, and what I did was I cut out a t-shirt graphic, also was mine, that I loved, and then I added the little trims to kind of frame it in, and it just gives it kind of a little bit of an extra touch. Plain on the front, party in the back. I guess that's like the mullet of fashion design. And so the next one is that same exact concept. I left the front as it is, and on the back I added a vintage t-shirt graphic. I framed it in with some trim, and I hand stitched, I don't know if I machine or hand stitched the stars on the edge, but I kind of wanted them to have sort of a scrappy look, so I used like wide stitching and I tried to make it in that way, and I'm really happy with how that one came out too. That is one that I see it as like a very subdued, like patriotic look. And speaking of patriotic looks, let's get into the next one, which is the same concept, which this might end up being one of my signatures. I took this vintage Sherpa vest, and then I left the front plain, I left the interior as it was, and then on the back I took a vintage flag graphic and I sort of cut it so that each panel would hit on another part of the seam, but you could still see the seam of the original vest. And this one I hand stitched in because the denim was really thick, and I also didn't want the interior Sherpa to have stitching showing. I wanted the Sherpa to stay as it was, so I stitched in by hand that top layer of denim. And if I could redo this one, I would make my stitches a little bit smaller, but t-shirt fabric does not fray, so there really wouldn't be an issue with wearability. Okay, next up is a trash to treasure concept. So I accidentally purchased 2 pairs of duck boots, and they were 2 separate sizes, but by the time I realized this, I had had them for months, so I decided to do sort of a trash to treasure DIY for our fall decor. I took the duck boot, I added in all these like natural-ish looking elements, the pumpkins, the just, you see it, you see it, you see it. In my opinion, it's still trash because I don't have that eye for floral design, but I included it in my favorites because I actually enjoyed the process of making it. I didn't like it enough to keep it, and so I basically took it apart, recycled the shoe, and I still have all those leafy pumpkin type things that I can use for other DIYs. But I really enjoyed making it. I enjoyed the creativity behind that one. Okay, moving on. Next up, we're gonna do 3-in-1, which is 1, 2, 3 pillow sets that I made. And these are my favorites because, one, choice of fabric. The fabrics I used on these were just really, really nice. And the first one I made was like that oriental graphic one. And that one, the backings aren't consistent. One of the backs overlaps more, and then the other one, it's like more of a shallow overlap. And I also pieced together fabrics that I had to make the back, so those are a little more eclectic, but I just absolutely love that oriental graphic on the front of them, and I love them together as a set, so I wanted to include that. But as I got better at becoming more accurate with like the shape and keeping the consistent shape across the pillows, the one that I made, and I think I already shared this, but the one I made with the blinds fabric, how that came across, and you can pull up the fabric, tie it, pull it back down. I love the effect that has. I love how it ties up, and it just came out just as I wanted. And then the tassel one, it's very simple, Yet I think these are the nicest quality of all the pillows I've made because the front and the back fabrics were both amazing fabrics, and the texture on the back, I love that. And I don't think that comes across in the pictures. But yeah, I noticed with pillows, I like making pillows. I like how simple they are, but how they can make a statement and just like an easy, quick way to kind of refresh something in your home. I think the other thing I can appreciate about the pillows is once you know how to do something, it becomes relaxing to make. So I think I will always make pillows because it's something that my mind can just sort of shut off. I go, I cut, I sew, I make, boom, they're done. It's just very relaxing. And pillows are great for somebody like me, a beginner. So maybe that's why I fell in love with them. Okay, this was a really fun one. So this one made me super nervous because there was nothing wrong with the original garment, which those tend to make me the most nervous because as a beginner, it's like, if I mess this up, like I messed it up, it feels like I messed up twice because I cut up something that there wasn't any flaws with it. I tried to sell this as it was and it was getting little to no interest. So I was like, okay, well, I really don't have a lot to lose here. So I went ahead and I cut it down the center. I loved the side slits that it already had. And then I chose like a lace, like a top colored lace to add down the side of each of the front panels. And it was so simple. It was like a simple fix, but I just absolutely love the final result of this one. It's very flowy, it's very shimmery. I picture somebody wearing this to like outdoor events, concerts, festivals, that's the sort of vibe that I was going for, and it did not disappoint. Okay, next up we have this denim or chambray. I think this was more on the denim end, and I took this panel that was already in this sort of patchwork design. That was an estate sale find, and then I paired it with a top that I already had on hand, and I cut out the back section where I wanted to put the bandana. Was it bandana? Where I wanted to put that patchwork sort of pattern, and then I just sewed it in place on the back. And this was also the first one that I added my own little label tag to on the inside, which I later found out that I did incorrectly, and I actually have to sew both pieces down, otherwise it frays when it washes. But I learn as I go. Learning as I go. I'm noticing a pattern. I like to mess with the back of the garments, but that leads me into the next one, which is I think the way I'm leaning more towards, which is not constructing garments from scratch. I'm not there yet, but taking pre-existing garments and altering them in a way that I think is a little bit more interesting or creative. And so this next one was just that I'm altering the blazer. It already had a lot of this studding and chain detail, and in my head I just kept picturing it as like one of the inspiration was like one of those marching band type things with the little pleating here. And so I took this pleated black fabric, and then I took some like sweater knit fabric that I thought played good because it was black, and then the sweater knit had a little bit of gold. And I put it on my mannequin, and I placed them, and I tacked them down, and then I just sewed everything in place. And I'm actually really happy with how that one came out. And I'm even happier that somebody actually purchased that one and they enjoyed it. So that was like a win-win. That was amazing. Okay, we have two more left, and this one I shared way back when I was on TikTok, and it's like a wool varsity jacket, but what drew me to it was like that flap thing on the back. And so then I had this fabric that I really loved, but I only had a small section of it, and so I wanted to combine the two of these to give it kind of like a schoolgirl sort of look, but then on the back it's like more of an artistic type vibe. And This took a lot of time because I actually had to go in and hand stitch it together because otherwise the stitching would show through on the other side, which again, I didn't really want that in this particular one. So I went ahead and hand stitched it down and it didn't disappoint. I absolutely love how this one turned out. And then that brings us into the last and final project, which was this fox fur, which if you've seen my other video, you know I've tried working with fox fur and failed before. But the good thing about it is you can always undo it and try again. And so I do have a lot of fox fur to work with, and I cut this piece into a sort of purposefully asymmetrical shawl collar. I didn't want to get hung up on the details of like, oh, it has to be completely even on both sides. I just wanted to work more with like, how does the fur lay, and then just kind of go with that. And so I sort of included that into it. So, okay, the fur lays a little bit like this. Okay, we'll cut there, and then sort of went like in that way. So I call it an asymmetrical shawl collar made out of this gorgeous fox fur. And the inspiration behind this one is from the DIY designer, which is an amazing resource for like upcycling and DIY projects because she has such a great eye for some of this stuff. And she showed how to like use these magnets instead of sewing like traditionally you would have sew buttonholes and then you button it to your jacket or collar. But with her style, which is using the magnets, you're able to just glue the magnet. I glued the magnet underneath the lining and then I hand stitched the satin lining. You will see there are a few imperfections. If you like look at the actual listing on my Poshmark, you can see a little bit of glue residue, but overall I still think it came out really good. But the little magnet is actually under the lining, and then you take the coordinating magnet, you place it wherever you want on your jacket, then put the magnet under and boom, it links up. And this way you can use the collar on any cardigan, any jacket, any vest that you want, and it completely transforms the look, and you don't have to add those permanent buttonholes to your garment. So I absolutely love that, and I highly recommend checking out Orly's channel, the DIY designer, because she has some amazing DIYs on there. I'm constantly finding inspiration from her channel and encouragement to like one day be able to do like pajama sets and some of these other things that it just feels too intimidating right now to tackle. But in the future, it's like cool to see that and like, okay, it could be done. Like she's doing it, she's showing how to do it, it can be done. So that wraps up this episode of my top favorite upcycles of 2020. So I hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.